Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Walberg.
Thank you, Chairman. And I thank Secretary for being here with us today. And I certainly would share the concerns, the horrific event that took place in Uvalde. It ought to be a wake-up call for us. And there are many things that we certainly can consider. But I hope we wouldn't neglect some of the other things. I'm reminded of that wonderful statement in the Northwest Ordinance that said religion, morality, knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. And so we want to encourage schools and the means of education, but religion and morality have to be there as well. And so when you see horrific things like this take place, it has to be all hands on deck in our homes, in our schools, in our churches, and we ought to be working together. And we did that for most of the history of this country. And we supplemented and instilled all sorts of those key values. And I hope we could coalesce again around those things and produce a stability in our society again, especially with our young kids, that marriage and family would be stable, that authority that comes from law enforcement would be stable in their lives, that we could work together in those areas. And I certainly want to be part of that solution in promoting things that are timeless and can move us forward, and not walking away from those just because it's the new trend in society to say your truth is what you ought to determine. We know that that won't work. There is truth, and we need to follow that. Having said that, let me move on with questions for this hour. And Secretary Cardona, I want to follow up on a topic Ranking Member Fox raised with you. Late last month, the markup reported that the Department of Education used Facebook's Metapixel and the analytical code to collect data from students and parents filling out the free application for Students Aid, FAFSA, and shared that data with Facebook. The data included names, phone numbers, email addresses, and zip codes. When initially asked about the tracking, the department denied it occurred only to later backtrack that statement, saying it was part of a, quote, advertising campaign. However, when asked for a briefing on the situation, the department told this committee and the Senate Health Committee that it would need to do more research before it could brief members. And so the question I have is that because of the lack of transparency to Congress and parents and students, which is alarming, Dr. Fox asked many questions regarding the depth of this data sharing, but I'd like to follow up on her questions and ask Mr. Secretary, do you believe parents and students have the right to protect their privacy when filling out the government forms?
Absolutely, Congressman.
Well, just this week, the Washington Post ran an article highlighting that remote learning has led to unfathomable amount of data on children being shared online. From the article, and I quote, millions of children have their online behaviors and personal information tracked by the apps and websites they use for school during the pandemic, end quote. The data on students was sent to other companies, ad companies, and surprise, Facebook. And all of this was done with vague disclosures, if any at all, in most cases. Mr. Secretary, do you share my alarm with the reporting on this issue?
Thank you, Congressman. I do. I'll be very frank with you. When I worked in the district, I was an assistant superintendent. One of the things that we did was ensure that as we're evolving our delivery of education, which includes online learning, that we were very careful and very open with parents. It's critical that parents know how information is being used.
So you agree?
When we learned that this Facebook.
Let me just make sure I understand. You agree then, Mr. Secretary, that we need to empower parents. We need to communicate with them in a transparent way, and regardless of who is asking for the information, they ought to be protected from undue access that can be used for purposes other than what they're intended.
Sir, before Secretary, I'm a father, and I absolutely agree that parents should have say, and they should have whatever information is being shared, they should know about it.
Well, I applaud that. And I certainly think that's where we can work together to tighten it down, to give security where it can be given, and work with parents first and foremost so that they know what's involved and know what's coming at their kids. Thank
Absolutely.
you, and I appreciate your response. I yield.